Wow. This is incredible. Good morning, everyone. How are we? Hang on a minute. We've got like a couple of thousand people in here, so how are we? Really good? Excellent. Because I'm going to talk to you a bit about what the hyper-specialization means in your organization. Like, the big question is, how does this play out? How does this affect your organization today? Right? What does specialization do to your business? Right? And I look at it in a couple of different ways. Right? One, it's a massive opportunity. It's a chance for you to take a generational shift in technology and actually drive competitive advantage, build new products and services, build cool, innovative things that, frankly, developers want to build and your organizations want to sell. But more importantly, expand or grow or break into new markets. It also means that your organization has a massive need and an exponentially growing need to connect all these things together. The key to hyper-specialization is you're getting well-defined units of value, but if you don't stitch them together, if you don't figure out how to connect them, then you only get marginal value out of any one of those elements, right? So that's pretty important. The problem is, and I've been doing this for 10 years, and you guys, some of you guys have been doing it even longer, is most enterprises have spent the last 20 years building point-to-point connections between their applications, creating tight couplings between your applications and data, which is strangling your agility. At this point in time where all this is going on, this shift is happening, you need to be moving fast and being more agile. You're actually treading water and gasping for air. You're not delivering what's needed to your business because you've got this older landscape of applications and data strangled by this point-to-point connectivity. So what we're seeing is a new approach. This new approach is emerging called application networks. And it enables a whole new level of agility, right? It allows you to think about connecting these external components with the internal components you have in your organization. It shifts your mindset from thinking about delivering projects to delivering well-defined, reusable self-serve assets as part of your natural project delivery within your organization. So I want you through this presentation just to map this concept of application networks to your organization. Think about what it would do to help drive agility, to unlock your assets, to drive innovation in your organization. So let's have a look at what this actually looks like in your org. So most organizations, even 5 years ago, were fairly monolithic, right? We had these big packaged applications. We used to call ourselves IBM shops. We used to call ourselves Oracle shops. And the way in which we drove competitive advantage was actually by taking those big application platforms and then customizing them to our needs, to our processes, to our supply chains. And that gave us competitive advantage. But in this world of hyper-specialization, your whole enterprise is being turned inside out, right? So now you've got to connect to SaaS applications outside your four walls of the data center. You're connecting to mobile apps, other devices. You've got to bring those things back into the enterprise to get value from them. And increasingly, you're moving workloads to the cloud. You're leveraging new platforms like AWS, like Microsoft Azure. You're using these platforms because they provide better scale. They've specialized certain aspects of compute, storage, and it's making it much more efficient for you to do things there than run it yourself. This is what specialization is doing to your organization today. But when you look at this, it's not about just being fragmented, right? There's actually something very profound happening here, right? Innovation used to happen behind closed doors in this, the central hub of the IT organization. Now what's happening is that innovation is being pushed to the edges of your business. And what else has changed is with hyper-specialization, everyone has the same building blocks. Right, so you no longer compete on the applications that you run because whether you're a four-person startup or you're a 100,000-person conglomerate, you're running the same applications. So the way in which you compete is how well you can connect these things together to deliver new products, new services to your customers. And one thing's for sure, the way you have been connecting, this point-to-point connectivity, isn't going to work in this new era. I want a quick show of hands. How many people have a significant amount of point-to-point connectivity in their enterprise? Quick show of hands. All right, it's got to be more of you. Keep your hands up for a second. How many are actually doing that in projects right now? Because the first step to this, and there's probably about half, maybe a bit more of the room, the first step to this is to admit that you have this problem. If you don't admit it, then it's really hard to get to the solution. So it's like a big therapy session right now. All right, so we've got to admit it. Some of you didn't admit to it, but I could see you, hang your heads in shame. That's not a good sign. You've got to admit it. Bring it out. The next 2 days, share this with other people next to you. Find out what they're doing that you're not doing. Right, because this room, there's a full spectrum of people that are starting to harness this and people who haven't quite yet figured out the best place to start. And the next 2 days, what I want you to do is walk away with a plan, an idea of how you're going to start thinking about tackling this problem. Now, I'm quite lucky to get to speak to many CIOs, and the conversation always starts the same way. We have the problems you're talking about. We need to move faster. We need to deliver more projects more quickly. And the challenges on IT are pretty simple, right? If you look at where IT is, IT delivery capability hasn't changed much over the last 5 years because there hasn't been that much investment in the IT organization. That investment's being spread out in other parts of the organization. Yet the demands on IT keep growing. Thanks to these technology trends, SaaS, mobile, IoT coming down the pipe, there's actually many more demands coming from the business for IT to deliver more and do it more quickly. And the conversation ends up coming out something like this. You want to move fast because you want to deliver more projects. And the CIO and certainly the leadership in your organization often think that if you're doing a SaaS implementation, that just get that one out of the way, we can go back to business as usual. Well, guess what? There is no business as usual anymore. That old world has died as soon as we started getting this specialization or hyper-specialization in our application landscapes. Right? When what you're actually experiencing is this IT delivery gap. There's just a discrepancy between the number of projects that you can deliver and the amount of demands on IT. Right? And the thing is, that gap doesn't get any smaller. It's only getting worse day by day as more of these new applications, more of these new services, more of these new types of devices, more of these new innovative business models hit your business, that gap is only going to widen. And current responses to this are inefficient and not working. Right? Working harder is just not sustainable. Running faster on that hamster wheel, trying to deliver more projects isn't going to work. And many of you, especially if you're in the delivery function, already feel the pain of this. You've already lost some weekends this year. You lost a few last year. It's not going to be sustainable. Outsourcing actually doesn't solve the problem. All you're doing when you outsource is you're outsourcing the delivery of more projects, but you're delivering them the same way. You're creating these point-to-point connections to deliver things faster without thinking about the bigger picture. And Agile and DevOps is a great step in the right direction. Right? You're thinking about how you organize your teams for more effective delivery. You're thinking about how you deliver through pipelines more effectively. That's fantastic. The problem is you're changing the way you deliver, but you're not changing what you deliver. So what's changed? What has changed is application programming interfaces, or APIs. Now, we're all very familiar with APIs, and they're doing something that happened to the web a number of years ago. In the same way that HTML normalized access to information on the web and caused the web to explode, we're seeing this similar behavior with APIs. APIs are creating the normalization on top of complex applications, allowing us to more easily connect to the value of the assets underneath. Right? And we've seen this play out in the web. Right? The web is the most complicated distributed system on Earth. Right? Way more complicated than any one of our organizations. Yet there's 16,000 public APIs on the web for doing everything from facial recognition to telephony to sending emails to deep learning machine algorithms. You can find a service to do anything. And what's happened once you open up those assets, when you have these reusable building blocks available to you, what happens? Innovation happens. We've already seen it. Look at your phone. Every one of those apps on your phone uses these building blocks on the web to drive new value. That's why Uber exists. It's why Airbnb exists, because people didn't have to go and build everything from the ground up. They took these building blocks that were available to them and started building new value on top. Well, all we're talking about with the application network is replicating that in the enterprise. Now, I know there's some skeptics in the room. If you've been in this industry for 20 years, there's been a lot of technology changes, a lot of trends. And some of you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute. Isn't this a bit like that lumbering dinosaur of SOA that never quite managed to cross the chasm? Right? And you're right. There's some big similarities between APIs and what we try to do with SOA. Right? SOA principles were absolutely sound. Right? Well-defined, loosely coupled interfaces makes a ton of sense. If you've got hyper-specialized services, the last thing you need is coupling, right? Making those services discoverable, very important. If you're going to drive reuse, people have got to find those services. Where SOA fell down, the reason why it didn't cross that chasm was for two reasons. The technology itself was woefully complicated and actually didn't fit the new world of mobile and devices and web applications, right? SOAP and SOA in itself was just too hard for developers to grasp. But what we found with APIs is APIs have found the happy medium, which means any developer on any language can find, discover, use, and consume an API. The other place where the SOAsaurus fell down was around the most important constituent in this equation, which is the user. If reuse is so important, who's the one person you need to think about? It's your consumers. You've got to package the information in a way that makes sense for them, in a way that they can understand, a way in which they can go off and build new value on top of it. Right? So SOA failed for those primary two reasons, but the web has shown us APIs can absolutely work to change this model completely around. Thing is, APIs are a catalyst for this change, but they're not sufficient on their own. Right? Because we've got SaaS applications with APIs. So if you've got two SaaS apps sitting in the cloud with APIs, all they do is stare at each other. They don't yet connect, right? To connect, you've actually got to do something to draw the lines between those applications. Now, the interesting about APIs is they can actually accelerate the point-to-point connectivity, right? Because they suddenly make it easier, more consumable for many poor people to just go and grab the APIs and stitch things together. So what you need is some organizational capability to bring these assets together into one fabric. And that fabric should be thinking about the security, the governability of the assets, how information is moving between those different applications so you know what's going on. Being able to trace information from a request call on a mobile app all the way back down to the core systems that application interfaces with. Right? You need some organizational fabric. You need a network. And that's what we mean by the application network. It's basically just an application of a network of applications, data, and devices that are connected with APIs, but we make them pluggable, and that enables us to create reusable services. This network concept is really important because it brings together not just a set of individual components, but it allows you to look at that set of components as really one big capability for your organization. The nice thing about this application network approach that we're seeing emerge actually emerges bottoms up. Companies aren't saying, hey, we're building our application network, let's go and invest $100 million to go and do it. What they're doing is they're changing the way they deliver every single project, so they start delivering maybe one or two reusable APIs, these API nodes on the network, as part of project delivery. Right? So it's not some major organizational change, but they're just changing the way they deliver projects to the business. The important thing of the network itself is it's there to provide the security, visibility, and governance. Now, the big difference here is, in order to make that work, you have to have a platform that brings APIs and connectivity together on one platform. The reason why we haven't seen this concept before is because we haven't brought those things together before. And the next 2 days, you'll see how we're moving towards that mode of bringing all that visibility from how people consume information to how it moves around the organization to what applications it hits on either side of the equation onto one platform. It's pretty powerful. But the important thing about this, and especially for the architects in the room, this is not an architecture. Right? I think we're done with the big bang architectures. We need emergent architectures that grow out of specific needs. Right? So the whole point of the application network isn't that you're defining an architecture, you're defining a set of reusable API nodes on a network that can be composed in different ways to build new applications, to build new architectures on top of. But the network itself actually bends. It doesn't break. It's there to sort of cope with the changes in your organization. If you unplug one application, plug another one in, it will continue working with minimal impact on anything around it. Right? The whole idea here is that you're building a fabric for change because, frankly, your IT environment has completely changed. And the way this emerges is pretty simple. Right? The first project you deliver, you actually don't just deliver the project as normal. You deliver the project and a reusable asset, or maybe two reusable assets. And that might just be order management information. So you open up that API. It's not a big lift. You do this as part of a project delivery. The second project, which might be done by a different team or the same team, they do the same thing, and they start to open some other bits of information, like inventory information. You do it again, and you open up a bit more information, like shipping and fulfillment. You do it again, and you get, for your customer experience, you start opening up your customer information. Right, so the delivery of the application network happens over time. Right, step by step, every project you deliver. And MuleSoft actually has a well-defined approach for delivering this that helps you align your teams and you actually even the way you organize your people around the platform to deliver this way. It's pretty straightforward. It might sound big, and we call it a new operating model, but in essence, it's a few simple steps that allow you to think differently about how you deliver value to the business. Now, a lot of the conversations I have around this is usually starts with the production in mind. How do I produce these assets? How do I build APIs? How do I build microservices? How do I plug this into my software development lifecycle? Those are all really important discussions, but almost everyone in this room will understand and get good at doing that. Some people already are, other people are halfway on the journey. But the goal here is to build reusable assets. These are the API nodes on your network that will be exposed to consumers. The important part of this journey is actually to drive the consumption. Right? Consumption is so critical because if you don't get leverage out of those nodes, as we learned, when we built SOA web services, we didn't get leverage out of those things, so they ended up being really, really expensive web services because we didn't drive reuse. We didn't package them in a way that more consumers could discover, drive self-service, and we didn't think about enablement. Right? Your organization, as an IT org, you're not used to thinking about enabling other people to get successful on things that you're building. You're used to building projects and delivering them and moving on to the next one. Right, so this consumption model is really important. So I'll contrast this with a quick story. So one of our customers is working with a pretty large data warehouse around their product information. And it was taking them about 20 to 30 weeks to get any piece of data out of that data warehouse. Right, and the reason being is because, like most of you recognize this, what they would do is they have to spec the project, find a specialist. That specialist would have a backlog of projects. They then craft the data out, move that data into a new database. They then have to clean that data up because it wasn't quite what people needed, and then they had to create an ETL script to update that information once a day or once a week. Right, it's a very slow process. What we started doing with them was say, well, why don't we build read-only APIs on top of the data warehouse that you can build really quickly once you know what the data is that you need. And then we'll expose those APIs through Anypoint Exchange, which is our way of discovering APIs on the network, and enable developers to find access to it. Then what we can do is package up those data APIs into something that actually business analysts can discover, what we call a data marketplace, which is basically just a simple web app that presents that information in a way that makes sense for a data analyst to plug into Excel or a BI tool. Right? And then they started teaching their business analysts to go to this data marketplace to find data they were looking for. And if they didn't find what they needed, they provided a fast track for specifying the data and gave them an SLA of 2 to 3 weeks to get that new data set. So something really interesting happened in the process of doing this project. Firstly, their IT team shifted to delivering reusable assets, which is great. This is what we're talking about. But more importantly, the IT team also started to teach the business to actually self-serve on their own. They gave them a capability, and they started teaching them how to use those capabilities to get the outcomes that the business wanted. So when we talk about operating model, it's just shifting the roles of people in the organization so that you can distribute the value of your assets more broadly across the organization. The other key thing that's really valuable here is we get all the feedback and metrics of what's actually working. Right, we don't actually do that much in IT. IT isn't actually very good at measuring how effective certain aspects of connectivity, certain aspects of integration are really working. And because we have no concept of driving reuse beyond a very small select group of people, we don't measure how well that's working. So feedback and metrics is critical. And one of the things I'm really excited about and a direction that we're moving towards is because we have this application network capability and because we can monitor everything end to end, everything from the consumption of the API that the consumer finds and uses all the way to how they use it and then operationally how it's actually working, we can start to build KPIs that measure how effective your journey of change is actually working. We can actually start doing things like seeing which areas of your organization is adopting this very, very well. We can see which areas aren't working so well. You can actually start to decide, do I put more investment there or do I kill it and start somewhere else? Right, giving you the KPIs and the metrics to drive change is critical because otherwise it's very hard to understand if your change is really having the impact you expected. And what's more, this will give you the tools and the arguments to go to the business and help them understand the value they're seeing from this approach as well. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and introduce a customer of ours in the banking sector that are going through this journey. And it's a pretty great story because it's exactly the story that we've been told around hyper-specialization. They're a bank that are 150 years old, yet they're completely rethinking how they offer every part of their service to their customers as banking as a service. So with that, I want to introduce Sid Yvas, who's the CTO of Capital Markets for Wells Fargo. Good morning, Sid.
Good morning, Ross. Good morning, everyone.
Great to see you. Thanks for coming up today.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about, what are you responding to at Wells Fargo? What are the pressures that are driving you down this direction?
So, Ross, as you know, many of our financial peer institutions are driving the digital transformation to easily onboard the customers and offer their services through the new channels. We are doing the same. This is the key initiatives for us, and we are hoping that this is the initiative which will help us in our key strategic initiative to drive the revenue growth by offering new banking products, and at the same time, using the flexibility, we can reduce some cost pressures.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you're really looking at this as a wholesale change in the way you deliver your products and services, both internally and externally.
Absolutely.
So what are the sort of outcomes that you're looking to achieve with this? What's the business, putting pressure on you to deliver?
So the key thing here is that we are executing against our vision of One Wells Fargo. We want to enhance the customer experience by offering this new channel and at the same time offer the agility and speed for our businesses to quickly onboard new customers. As you know, last year we launched our new digital platform, Wells Fargo Gateway, which is banking as a service, and it offers all of the banking services, key banking services like account services, payments, and foreign exchange through this channel.
And it's important to note there, when you say services, you really are talking about the self-serve APIs, right?
That is correct.
You're building this application network for capital markets. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you've gone about this? Maybe talk through a couple of examples.
It's just simple using, we're building this redundant network which is using reusable API and leveraging the existing patterns to serve our customer. To give you an example, support the foreign exchange, and we are offering an API. We have been offering an API for foreign exchange for our large corporate customers who can execute foreign exchange rates, foreign exchange contracts. They can get the quotes, they can trade against those quotes, and all without any human intervention and at a speed very fast. We are using the same API for our internal channels for our applications like wires, where a small retail customer who wants to send money to their friends and family across the globe, they can use that to send wires. So same API is being used by both our large multinational corporate customers as well as our retail customers. And you can imagine the amount of transaction volume is going through that API.
That's pretty impressive. So essentially, you're creating, hyper-specialization of services for 4X, and anyone can use those, whether it's your traditional customers, newer, smaller customers, even your internal folks to drive new products and services.
Exactly.
Cool.
That's the paradigm.
Excellent. So what's next for Wells Fargo? Where are you taking this?
So we're taking it next in the sense that we're offering these services to our new customers, and we have created a lot of business value for our internal and external partners using these services. We can say that we've started building the basic application network with the use of these services. Our goal is to continue to build that. We have a global footprint, and we want to offer that to our global customers.
Fantastic. So, in essence, these aren't just small services. These are global, hyper-specialized services for foreign exchange across, probably 190 countries that you operate in.
We operate around 100 plus countries in the world, and we provide about 160 plus different currencies to our customers. To give you another example, we are connected as a payment network. We're connected to multiple payment networks. We are connected to thousands of customers to process their payments. And it has been a challenge in the past to onboard these customers because, as you know, they have multiple formats, different formats, and having those formats easily transformed into our internal consumable format has been a challenge in the past. With this journey and this architecture in place, we are now able to quickly onboard a customer in a couple of weeks, where it used to take multiple months in the past. So.
That's fantastic. Sid, I really appreciate you coming up today, and I wish you all the best as you start rolling this out across the organization.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Wow, that's a great story. It's a great example. No matter what industry you're in, what business you're in, you have to start thinking differently about how you deliver your value to market, right? The quicker you understand where your value is going to be, how you can unlock your assets. We see this story not just across banking. We see it a lot in banking, but we see it across every industry. We're working with governments, so they're opening up information, portals through APIs so that agencies can connect more easily. Before that, they were, doing everything point to point. It was costing, millions per year to manage that type of infrastructure. We're seeing the same thing in healthcare, in patient records, the same thing in education. Across every industry, everyone's starting to realize that really the rules of engagement have actually changed, right? It's not about having verticalized services top to bottom that you can just offer anymore. You've got to think about how you become part of many different value chains, right? So Wells Fargo is going to be built into other fintech startups that need foreign exchange capabilities. They're also going to serve their customers the same way. It's a pretty powerful concept. And when I said earlier, map this to your organization, think about that approach to your organization. What would you do differently? What would you specialize in? What are your specialized services? There's another benefit to this approach, this application network approach, and it's really forward-looking and thinking about where the technology trends are going. What's interesting, if you look at what's coming down the pipe, what's next, every technology trend is leveraging APIs already. Right? If you look at microservices are really just the cousin of APIs. The idea is pretty simple. You break down monolithic applications into hyper-specialized services. The role of the API microservice is just to then expose those services out to a broader audience of people. Well, IoT isn't going to connect with your enterprise unless you have a way to connect those devices in. You need to have an API fabric there so that you can receive and send that information back out again. Every API device is decoupled with APIs. So what about things like artificial intelligence, right, and even augmented reality? Like these more forward-looking technologies that are starting to be more pervasive in the press right now are really interesting. How does the application network help there? Well, think about these two quite different technologies. They're really powerful components. They're hyper-specialization for machine learning or being able to map capabilities over a real image or a real viewport. Yet, none of these actually work that well unless they can connect out and bring the contextual data in real time and actually send requests or commands back out in real time to make actions happen. Right? Every new technology trend coming along isn't going to work unless you can connect it in to everything else that you own to provide value. Artificial intelligence is actually useless unless you can connect all your data sets into it and it can start to learn and infer things from those data sets. Augmented reality needs access to contextual information at the point where that person is, so you can overlay that information that helps them understand what's going on in front of them, right? So all of these trends are pointing in the same direction, that you get hyper-specialized trends and you've got to figure out the way to bring these back into your organization. And that's really what the application network represents. It's not just speed and agility for the sake of building new projects or delivering new projects to the organization. It's speed and agility and innovation by creating these reusable components across teams, emerging through your everyday project delivery. You don't have to change a lot to make that happen. The point of the network is it has the analytics security governance built into the network. And a lot of what you'll be hearing about the next 2 days is what we have today, but also where we're taking that. We're thinking a lot further down the line when you have, thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of application nodes. How do you manage that together as a cohesive IT landscape? And the whole goal here is really to unleash the value of your enterprise. If you think back to what Wells Fargo is doing, they're not they're not bringing in new stuff necessarily. They're taking their existing businesses, but they're opening up in ways that they can take part in more value chains. They're opening up in ways that they can reach more consumers, more types of ecosystems, so they can unleash the value of their enterprise across many more channels. I think the most important thing here is the reason why this matters is we're in a bit of enterprise Darwinism right now, right? Only the fast are going to survive here. If you don't learn how to adapt, if you don't learn not just how to deal with change, but actually thrive in the face of change, it's going to be really difficult to compete over the next 5 to 10 years.